We do have a pretty full session today. I think we sold out actually on Eventbrite, which is great. Obviously, lots of interest and people hearing about how peer support and early intervention can work together. So we'll go over a little bit of a plan for today's session. So like I said before, we have 1 hour, 1 hour of inspiration to kickstart your morning, kickstart your day. And we will be having 2 separate contributions. One will be a presentation and another will be a sort of facilitated conversation interview. And there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. So please, if throughout either inputs you have questions, pop them in the chat. We will have someone from the team, Louise, will be sort of monitoring these, and we will have a Q&A session. If there is something that comes up throughout the Q&A session, you can just raise your hand and we'll be able to unmute you and you can ask your question. Now, we did send out a contributor profile prior to the session, so if you want to know a little bit more of background about the people that we'll be hearing from today, you can check in your email. We just did this to save a bit of time this morning because we only have an hour together. So a little bit of background about the session before we dive in. So we're looking at peer support and early intervention, and we know that there's a real opportunity to develop and to grow the peer support landscape in Scotland, which is why we have these Peer Connect sessions. And this includes a better understanding of the really powerful and nuanced role that peer support plays in early intervention. And this session will draw on learning from experience, where peer support has really been embedded within environments providing early intervention support around mental health. And we'll hear a little bit more from our 2 separate groups of contributors on what this looks like in practice, as well as the impact that it has. So we're really delighted to be joined by Steve Hardie and Jim McEvoy from the South Angus Peer Support Service, as well as Wendy Callander from Wellbeing Works in Dundee. So Wendy, I'd like to invite you to centre stage.
I'm Wendy Callander. I'm the Executive Director at Wellbeing Works in Dundee. So Wellbeing Works is a mental health charity that's been around for a wee while. We were established in 1925. So next year's our centenary year. Thanks, Holly. Can you move on to the next slide for me?
Yeah, yep. Ailey's got control of the slides, so she'll do, if you just say move on, and she'll do it her end.
Perfect. So yes, so we were established in 1925, at that time as Dundee Association for Mental Health, and then a few years back we rebranded and modernised and moved and made lots of changes to the organisation and became Wellbeing Works in 2019. So our aim generally is to improve mental health and wellbeing for people in Dundee. And that's a really broad aim, but that's the aim that we'll work to, and I think it works well for us. I have a staff team of 12 made up of full-time and part-time staff, and we have a current caseload of 120 participants. That's a pretty normal caseload for us. So we're funded through Dundee Health and Social Care Partnership, and in 2019, our peer team was established through Action 15 monies, Scottish Government Action 15 monies, that the team was mainstreamed into our Health and Social Care Partnership contract in 2023. So they're now properly embedded into our team. Next slide, please, Ellie. So in terms of early intervention, I think our organisation historically might have been seen as a bit of a day service. It was a place where people who faced mental health challenges came and were able to meet other people and get involved in some activities. And it was just a safe place to be. There wasn't really a lot of thought about moving on or goals or aspirations that people might have, or how we actually provide meaningful support in terms of recovery. So in the last probably 8 or 9 years, we've had much more of a focus on that. And over the last couple of years have moved to really reflecting on what works, what doesn't work, and repositioning ourselves further upstream so that we're involved in early intervention. So we're no longer that day service type of provision, and we're very much about taking people on a journey, and we're not the destination. So we're just another part of the journey that leads someone to somewhere else. And this slide gives you a wee bit of a sense of what that journey might look like. So stage 1 is really about just getting to know people, introducing people to staff and other participants, and just a gentle introduction to starting to think about what are your plans and aspirations and how are we going to help you to achieve them. Stage 2 of the process is much more about getting involved in activities. So there are workshops, there are courses, there are volunteering opportunities. There's lots of group activities that people can get involved in that will help to build confidence, give them structure and routine, and help them to think about what their aspirations for the future might be. And then stage 3 is really about connecting with other opportunities in the community. That might be employment support, it might be longer term volunteering, but whatever the stage the person's at, there's always an option for peer support. I'll go on to talk about that again just in a couple of slides' time. The thing about this journey though, there's no time limit or restriction on how long does it take and what does the journey look like. It's just important that when people come to us, they know we're going on a journey together and we're going to support you to achieve what it is you want to achieve. And if that happens to be, I just want to feel more confident, or I don't want to be lonely anymore, or I want to understand what's going on in my head. If that's the goal or objective, then we'll take people on a journey to learn about those things and feel more confident and comfortable in their own skin, really. Next slide, please, Ailey. So in terms of the work that we do in the stage 2 of that journey, we've split our, just based on what we know, we've split our activities into 4 main themes. So we have wellbeing skills that tea and talk sessions are really grab a cuppa, let's go and sit in a wee group in a nice space and talk about stuff, just to get people talking about stuff and being able to be part of a conversation with other people. And I think the big thing that comes out of that type of opportunity for lots of people, it's realizing that actually loads of people feel the same way that I feel, and actually I'm not as bad as them, so I'm doing okay. That kind of thing happens there. It's relaxed, informal, but it gets people talking and builds confidence and builds relationships. We also have a Well Ahead course, which is a course that we designed, a 6-week course that takes people through a series of modules that include building confidence, setting goals, tackling obstacles, negative thought processes, putting together a wellbeing toolkit. So it's a real covers everything kind of intervention. And then other skills we've got there, we've got relaxation and yoga, chair yoga, because we don't have a gym, we've got a room with chairs in it. So wellbeing skills, creative skills, I think we all know the value and benefit of creative skills in mental health and recovery. So we've got arts and crafts groups, photography, guitar, opportunities for creative writing, knitting, crochet, whole load of creative skills. Outdoor activities are a big part of our offer, mainly because I think we just really see the benefit of outdoor activity in terms of well-being. So we'll have walking groups every week. We have our allotment on the Law. We also look after gardens down at the waterfront at the V&A and the Unicorn. And we do a group called Noticing Nature, which is just about mindfulness outdoors. And we do lots of trips. We get people on trains and take them out of their own houses, schemes, city, into another city, make the world a bigger place, which is all really good for just giving people a bigger sense of the world. And then the last of those themes is giving. Last year, we secured some funding through Big Lottery to run a Volunteering Plus programme. So it's basically supported volunteering, where our volunteer coordinator will organise volunteering opportunities for us, mostly in the heritage sector. So it's volunteering with the Discovery or the Unicorn or Verdant Works or the Botanic Gardens, or volunteering is going to be a good experience and we're going to be well looked after. But what invariably happens from that is that people will go and try some volunteering, and invariably after the 6-week block has ended, people will go on to volunteer independently with the Unicorn or Verdant Works or wherever it might be in Dundee. So that's the volunteering offer, but we also acknowledge the giving that people do just by coming along and getting involved in steering groups and focus groups and consultations that we have, and by just supporting each other. So I think it's just about acknowledging that everybody's giving at some level and giving people recognition for that. I've put the wee image of 5 ways to well-being on the slide there because pretty much everything we do fits into the five ways to well-being model, and it's just such an easy model to explain and define. So that's pretty much all that we do, and peer support again is woven through all of that. Next slide please, Ellie. So this is our peer team. Scott's our peer development worker, and we'll have Marissa and Laura who are our peer workers. And that's just an indication of the kind of things that our peer workers can get involved in and support participants with. So it might be in managing stress or anxiety, it might be in setting goals or trying new things, or dealing with issues like if they've had a letter that they're not comfortable with, or they're dealing with a housing department or whatever. Our peer team can get involved in that kind of problem solving. And then the last slide, second last slide please, Ailey. So this is the one that really, I think, explains how peer support fits in our organisation. So right from the time when, if the person is referred through a referral form, so that might be coming from mental health teams or psychology services or link workers or wherever the referral comes from, there's a bit on the referral form that asks, would this participant benefit from peer support at this stage of the process? So with us, would it be helpful if they had a peer worker to help them with that? And if it says yes, we'll allocate a peer worker, they'll get in touch with the referrer, they'll arrange to meet the person and support them to come into the organisation. So if they didn't need peer support at that stage, the next thing that will happen is they'll have a first meeting with a support worker. And this is just a hello, here's who we are, let's take you on a tour, let's meet some key people, and just start the ball rolling, gentle introduction to the organisation. But at that stage, the support worker will also ask if the person feels that peer support would be a useful thing for them in the next stage of the journey. And if that's the case, then we can instantly introduce them to a peer worker who can pick that up and support them through the next part of the journey. The second meeting that the support worker has with the participant is really about coming up with a plan of what are we going to do to support you? What are the key issues for you? And invariably it's confidence, managing anxiety, isolation, it's those types of things, and our programmes designed and set up to support people through that. But if somebody felt like yeah, I would love to go to and do arts and crafts, but the thought of going into a group of people just makes me feel ill. So it might be that we allocate a peer worker who can just work with the person over a couple of weeks to build their confidence and make it okay and comfortable for them to come into a group activity and stay with them for as long as they need someone to stay with them until they feel comfortable to be able to manage that on their own. And then the next part of the process, where the support worker meets with the participant again, will be to review how is it going, what's going on for you, what are you enjoying, what can we do next, what's the next part of the plan for you. And again, the support worker and the peer worker will meet with the participant. If the peer worker's been involved in that journey, they'll all sit down together and talk about what's happened, how it went, and identify, is there a need for further peer support in the next set of goals or plans that we'll have? And if the answer to that is no, then that's essentially where the peer worker relationship ends, and the person will go on to maybe attend more groups and activities or get involved in volunteering or whatever the next stage of their journey is. However, if what they identify in that conversation is actually, yeah, there maybe is a need for peer support again, then we just go back to the stage before and set some plans and goals about. So there's quite a lot on that slide, but hopefully it makes sense to you. And then the next slide, please. So when along those stages, if the support worker and the participant identify that actually, yes, peer support would be a good thing, they'll fill in the form. Now, the blue bits are the bits that the support worker and the participant will complete. So it's really just the person's name, the reason for the referral, and that might be, for instance, recently had a lady who lacks confidence in using public transport, and she was able to come and access our service, but only because her son came on the bus with her and brought her into the centre of town and stayed in town and then took her home again. So the reason for referral was to build confidence in using public transport. So what happens then is that the referral form's given to Scott, who's the peer development worker, and he'll look at caseloads and matching the person with the appropriate peer worker, and they'll sit down with the participant and plan, okay, how are we going to build your confidence in using public transport? And they'll come up with that plan and the timescale for that, and set a review date. And at the end of the process, everybody signs it off as a bit of work that's been completed. So it's quite a, this is quite a radical shift for us. When I look at how peer support looked in 2019, when basically what it felt like is we had peer support workers around in groups and doing stuff on a one-to-one basis, but the work kind of lacked focus and definition, and we were never sure when it came to an end. So our reflections on all of that brought us to the process we currently have, and the feedback I'm getting from peer workers is they like having that defined bit of work to do, so that everybody knows we've achieved it, or we've not achieved it, we need to look at something else. This change has been a really nice, I think, improvement for everybody, where support workers are able to allocate bits of work to peer workers are able to do the work with participants are benefiting because they're getting that one-to-one support. That's all I have, but I'm happy to get involved in any questions or conversations about this. I don't know how you want to do that, Ailey.
Thanks, Wendy. We will have a Q&A session after we hear from Steve and Jim, but thank you so much for your presentation, Wendy. I'll stop sharing. So we'll have a chance to pick back up on some of the things Wendy's covered there. And yeah, I think it was really interesting to hear about how you took a model that you thought, maybe it wasn't working in the best way it could, and you've adapted it and you've tried something brave, you've tried something new, and it's great to hear that, it's working positively. And I made a few notes there about, it's meaningful support and recovery. So it's intentional and purposeful, and you're seeing really great results with that, which is great. And I think it's also a really great example of how peer support can be woven throughout more traditional therapeutic interventions. Those are things that are not unfamiliar to people, that are not unfamiliar to services, but you've sort of found space for peer support throughout that. So thank you very much, Wendy, for sharing. Next, we're going to have a little bit of a facilitated conversation now with Steve Hardie and Jim McEvoy. Steve and Jim, you're from the South Angus Peer Support Service, or Peer Service. I think just to kick us off, it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about the service, just to set the scene a little bit. So what is it, and how is it delivered?
Sure. So we are currently commissioned by the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership to deliver 2 peer support services in South Angus. The contract is actually for the whole of Angus, but it's split between 2 providers. So Penumbra provide the support in the south of Angus. So we have an adult peer support service that is open to anyone 16 plus living in South Angus. And we have a young person's peer support service, which is open to any young person 11 to 15 attending secondary school in South Angus. So we have a peer worker assigned to each GP practice in the south of Angus, which I think is 5 in total, and we've got 6 peer workers. And then we've got 4 secondary schools, and we've got 2 peer workers that kind of go between the 4 secondary schools. So essentially what it is the service commissioned to deliver 2 types of support. So one is one-to-one support, which is designed to be sort of short-term intervention, so usually between 3 and 4 appointments. And they also offer group support as well. So we would typically across both services run a block of workshops once a quarter, so 4 times a year, looking to bring relatively small groups of supported people together, usually no more than 12, probably averaging 6 to 8 in reality. And they're sort of discussion and activity-based workshops designed to get, supported people more knowledge and understanding around their mental health and some of the issues that they're dealing with. The one-to-one support that we offer is very person-centred, so it's very led by the person that's sat in the chair. But I suppose what underpins it all is that peer element and that sort of shared understanding. So our peers will use, their own lived experience as well as kind of the training and knowledge that they've got and they've developed over the years to kind of support people towards sort of a meaningful interaction for them. That might look like, and Jim will tell you he's a member of staff in the service, but that could be people just looking to feel heard initially. So looking to sort of just chat through kind of what they're feeling, what's going on for them. For others, it could be actually like, I want to work through this particular issue. So it could be anxiety, for example. So it could be working through self-management tools and resources, going through coaching them techniques and things like that. I suppose what it looks like person to person is going to be different every single time. And it's going to be sort of what is meaningful for that person. Is there anything you would like to add to that, Jim?
No, it's exactly that. Quite often folk are going to feel a bit more comfortable talking to somebody who's not a clinician to begin with, especially if you've never dealt with clinicians before, because clinicians tend to be an awful lot of questionnaires and no much opportunity for you to talk, if you like. And a lot of folk find it really helpful just to open up, as Steve said, feel as if they've been heard, and then we can start to look about how we can work on that, work on what it is they need to work on. So, yeah.
And I suppose...
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Jim, on you go.
What I really loved about peer when I was in recovery, I mean, we use peer as a sort of new idea, but I mean, I went through my recovery a long time ago, and I had mentors and sponsors and people who were pretty much peer workers. And what they never ever tried to do to me, they never ever tried to diagnose me, they never ever tried to medicate me, they never ever tried to take me on a medicalized or a medical model of recovery. What they did was help me find my own path forward and help me discover that rather than impose it on me. And that's what I like about peer. We can also coach, help folk navigate later on if they have to go further into with clinicians, we can help them navigate that process a bit, make them feel more comfortable about going. So, yeah.
And what does your role look like, Jim, in practice as a peer worker within the service?
It's quite varied. I'm in Moneyfeith at the health centre at the moment, and sometimes here the area's a wee bit more affluent, so quite often we'll get people turning up with it's merely a situational problem. We can help them regulate how they're feeling, their emotion a bit, and then we can help them problem solve after that and look at that. A lot of young people or younger people presenting with anxiety, a lot of people self-diagnosing, looking for ADHD assessments and things, and we can help them discover a wee bit, is it really that, or are you ignoring past trauma, something along those lines, do we need to do that? And we'll help fill out the next referral for them, etc. So we'll do that, we'll help folk resolve an issue, problem solve, we'll help them with referrals, we'll help them decide what they think's going on, and sometimes feel heard, and that what they're going through is quite normal, if you like. It's often a part of a journey of life. So, yeah, if I was in the crisis centre, which I am at weekends, it's more about regulating emotions and helping folk, helping them with bring down their distress, and calm people so they can problem solve, etc. So we either distract them or talk them down, and then try and help them, maybe see them again to try and help them on a journey. Probably where the last participants, they're pretty useful as a referral source in Dundee. So, yeah.
Well, to give you a bit of context, if that's all right, in terms of how the service got to where it is now, which is obviously a commissioned service. We've just been given another 3 years of funding from the partnership, which is really, really good. But it goes back to sort of 2016, when we kind of went through a test of change. So essentially what happened is we, as an organisation, we were working in the community anyway, and one of our workers sort of identified an opportunity to actually, this sort of might work, having a peer attached to the GP practice. So they kind of chapped the door in a local GP surgery and went, would you be up for giving this a go? And they sort of agreed, and it went from there. So that's kind of how it started. It started from an idea and is now sort of a commissioned service. 2018, 2 GP practices actually then provided funding for peer workers 1 day a week. And that went really well, so that in 2020 the peer service was then commissioned by Angus Health and Social Care Partnership for 4 years, and then it was going really, really well. So in 2021, that's when they decided they wanted to replicate it for young people. So the young person's part of the peer support service has been going since 2021, and then, like I said, taking us up to 2024, we've now been given another 3 years of funding. So it shows you like how the service is sort of developed from an idea, 1 peer worker 1 afternoon a week, to now we've got 6 members of staff attached to every South Angus GP practice. It's been a really, really, positive journey. And I suppose some key stats that might be useful to know. So the people we've supported in that time in the adult peer service has been between 60 and 90 years old. But 18 to 25-year-olds most frequently access the service in the south. And actually in the north, which is provided by the other service provider, it's 30 to 39. the number of referrals to both providers since the beginning is over 12,140. So that's between both service providers, and that's a rolling number. So actually that number will be higher now than at the time of writing. The highest reason for referral is anxiety, low mood and stress, but other notable reasons are work stress, bereavement, sleep, relationships, depression and general mental health. And I think the other really important thing to highlight here, given, you know, the weight that there can be for mental health support, is the response rate, is the people are contacted within sort of 3 working days, and they're offered an appointment within 14. And that's across the north and the south. So support with our peer services generally starts really, really fast.
Yeah, the GPs seem to really like it because we work in as a wellbeing hub, so we come together as a group, including psychology, drug and alcohol team, etc. We come together every day. Somebody attends that. But what peers been able to do quite a lot of the time is, once folk realise there are tools there and they get a bit of coaching on how to use them, and they see that your peer that they've worked for me and other people, it stops a lot of folk going on to level 2 psychology. They don't need level 2 psychology, etc. So it's quite a money saver in its own right, if you like, as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and these are things that we know, don't we? You know, that if we get in early, if there's a support there at the beginning, that often people don't need to progress into
That's right,
more intensive therapeutic intervention. And of course, it saves them money in the long run. But what we care about is that people get the help and support that they need when they need it. I'm wondering a little bit about peer workers. So how do you think that they enhance the mental health support that's available in South Angus?
Well, I think it is the possibility that people have often reported they felt heard, like we said before. This seems to be key. As an older worker, I think it's pretty useful to have some older workers, because there's an awful lot of isolation out there, and folk are getting referred with things like low mood and anxiety. And when we get speaking, it's really isolation, it's bereavement, it's etc. They've not been able to. So being able to then signpost them or connect, we usually connect people directly rather than just signpost them to somebody who can help get them involved in community activity or whatever they need. And that often resolves that issue itself. We'll certainly look at signposting people further on to things like Silver Cloud, etc., if we thought they needed a wee bit extra. Yeah, the opportunity to discuss as a peer with other professionals for the hub is a really useful tool as well every morning, if you need to ask a question, take a bit of advice, etc. So I suppose the contribution we are making is a pretty quick response, an early intervention. Yeah. Folk are getting heard, and it's usually within 3 days. We say a fortnight, but we're usually connecting with people within 3 days. And the relief in somebody's voice when you phone them to say, look, I can make an appointment for you. It'll be a wee bit further along, but here's what we can do, and here's some stuff I could send you now that might help. So
yeah, and I can imagine for people coming along to the service that's a great relief.
Very much.
To hear that it will be a few days rather than weeks or months at a time for support.
Again, to give a bit of context, so this is a relatively new approach. It's been going on in the north of Angus for a couple of years. It's new this year to the south, but Jim mentioned kind of the hub approach. So there is ECS Hub, which I think it stands for Enhanced Community Support Mental Health Hub. So basically this is something that's happening across every locality in Angus now, and every day, like sort of an MDT team of professionals will come together. So you've got, you know, clinical support, you've got community mental health, you've got psychology, psychiatry, you've got third sector as well. So you've got like ourselves, you've got ADARs, just lots of professionals that work in mental health, and they'll come together every day. So basically, really what our partnership have tried to create is like a one-stop referral shop. So people who actually, they can self-refer to this hub, or, you know, professionals can refer into it. But basically, everyone will be discussed by a team of professionals, and I suppose the most appropriate support for that person agreed. And then that organisation will go away and make initial contact, which is really good. And I think like our peers are there in the South Angus every day. And actually how this relates, I suppose, to how the peers enhance what we're doing. I think what's been really good is when sometimes the referral reason isn't clear, because people can self-refer. Sometimes like the reason for referral is just something like mental health. And that doesn't really tell us a lot about what support that person needs, what issues they're facing. And what generally happens in those cases is our peer team will make contact with those people and have sort of initial discussions. And our peer team are very good at sort of getting information out of these people, do you know what I mean? To like really having a meaningful discussion about what's going on. And then our peers can go back to the hub with that information. Actually, I've discovered that they've got this going on, and referral to psychology might be more appropriate, or actually they're dealing with lots of complex trauma, they might need assessed by CMHT, do you know? And that's something that, do you know, our peers have brought to the offer in South Angus that wasn't necessarily there before, do you know?
Definitely, and it helps the service user or the supported person feel more comfortable about moving forward. Once we explain that there's a better support there for you. I think you're right, Steve. So.
Yeah, thanks both. So you mentioned that you've got a new set of funding, so you're going to be around for the next few years and hopefully further into the future. What are your plans for the future, but also what would be your dream for peer support in South Angus?
I don't know what you would say, Jim, but I think for me, like, you know, when you're operating as a commissioned service, you're sort of block of funding, a block of funding, a block of funding, a block of funding. And as much as you are, you know, doing the best that you can with the funding that you've got, I suppose you've probably always got an eye on the future and what's ahead. And I think for me, my dream would be that the service just almost, it sounds ridiculous to say like an infinite amount of funding, but do you know what I mean? We move away from that sort of commission-based thing, and actually it's just sort of like a fully funded service that continues, because I think it is and has been that valuable to the community of Angus. I think it's something that should be around for ever.
For me, similar, but I would like to see the 3 or 4 appointments are a useful starting place. But for people who might not need to go into level 2 psychology or psychiatry or whatever, I would like to see a seamless move into some sort of wellness intervention that we used to have with the likes of Nova, etc. Or like Wellbeing Works. I would like to see that in South Angus, where we can move smoothly into continuing to support somebody develop their wellness, maybe even a RAP or whatever, and help support them through their wellness recovery action plan, and allow folk to engage in stuff like that, because we do so much, and then if it's left hanging, that would be my dream, a proper wellness centre, a real wellness centre.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you both, Jim and Steve. It's been really great hearing more about the goings on in Angus. And we did have quite a few questions coming in as you were chatting. So it would be great if we could kickstart our Q&A session.
Hi everyone. Well, thanks very much. That was 2 really interesting inputs. that get us thinking about just different ways of doing things. I'm not going to say too much because there's some questions. So I thought I would start off with, we've got some questions on referrals, participants, evaluation, and what I would say is ways of working. So starting off for referrals, there's a couple of very basic questions, but interesting ones for Wellbeing Works, Wendy. Is how do people get referred to Wellbeing Works, and can they self-refer? And how you manage the sort of time pressures, and does that lead to any difficulties in planning service provision for new referrals?
Thanks, Louise. So historically, all of our referrals were referrals that came in from other mental health professionals or projects or people who worked with our client group. But in a couple of years back, we moved our premises to the Wellgate Shopping Centre. So we essentially now have a shop front. And for the first time in our 100 years, self-referrals are the second highest source of referrals for us. So people can just walk in the door and access support, which is brave and bold, but it means that people are able to get help instantly. We don't have a waiting list. And in terms of managing capacity and flow through, I think because we have such a varied programme, we're able to accommodate people. So, for example, if we're going to start with someone in a walking group, then we can fit somebody into a walking group at any time. There's no real capacity issue for that. And the other factor that influences some of our work just now is that lots of the people who are referred to us might be working and coming to us just for an intervention that might be the Well Ahead course, for instance. So they'll come along for a 6-week block, and then they've gained the skills and knowledge and information and tools that they need, and they might only be with us for a couple of months and then move on. So that flow through, touching wood, that flow through seems to work for us. So we don't have a problem attracting referrals. We don't have a problem with people getting stuck in the service, and there's enough capacity for everybody.
And just a wee follow-up before we go on to a question for Penumbra is, what's the average age of people who come to Wellbeing Works, and has it changed over the last few years?
Yeah, so 10 years ago, I would say our average age was probably 55 to 60, and now it's probably 35 to 40. So we haven't yet managed to attract and make an impact on younger adults, on teenagers, and I think that's just not our track. I think we're better leaving that age group to people who are better experienced and qualified. So yeah, our age demographics have definitely changed, and I think that's because our programme has changed.
Thanks very much, Wendy. I've also got a question for Steve and Jim. So if a person's mental health deteriorates, or if they're in crisis, while you're working with them, can you still help them?
If they were in crisis, we would be able to support them to regulate their emotion, but we would often move them forward or contact a community mental health team to make sure they got an urgent appointment and got seen. Yeah, we can do that. It depends.
And actually, because the relationships from us sitting in the hubs now are so improved, we're no longer are like CPNs and things, just email addresses to us. They're people we've met and known, and so the relationships are now better. So that process has become a bit smoother. So if someone is in crisis and we think, right, they need seen and assessed urgently or whatever, we're able to pick up the phone to someone we now know quite well, and our opinion, I feel, is valued as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the trust for judgment a bit
Yeah.
We're working every day with them, so they get to know they trust our judgment, and we can certainly lift the phone and get appointments, as Steve said, if it's urgent. Yeah.
It's amazing how connections and relationship are really important to recovery, but they're also really, really important to helping people in their recovery. We sometimes forget that in our big diagrams. And another question for South Angus service, is there any specialist training for the workers who are coaching in self-management techniques?
Yeah, I mean, all the staff will go through sort of an induction where there's like core and mandatory training and things. Penumbra have their own sort of framework and things as well that they've developed. So there's the IROC toolkit, which stands for Individual Recovery Outcome Counter, which is a bigger piece of work that we typically don't use in its full in the shorter term services. But as a part of that, there is recovery coaching training that goes along with that. There's coaching around sort of the toolkit that goes along with that. So staff are given that as a base. But I think our staff as well, they're really good at, if they feel like there's a knowledge gap, they will just go and fill that. Like they will come to management, I need training on this, or they will go and find their own resources. So there's kind of a bit of it. They've got that base, but then they've also got that sort of freedom to go and fill in gaps as they see fit as well. I don't know if you would agree with that, Jim, but
I do.
That definitely would be my take on it.
I certainly do. There's loads of training in run about it, but I would say that I've worked in both North and South and several peer services, and so and almost every peer I know, probably to help their own recovery, went on a journey trying to educate themselves about their own experience and developed a huge amount of training, etc., before they ended up working in peer. So some of that was through volunteering and all the kind of extra supports you get there. But a lot of folk ended up going back to university, etc., just to help their own recovery, if you know what I mean, and take courses in counselling and coaching and things. And almost everybody that works in our team has pretty much done that, I think. Almost everybody, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jim.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just one little quick question, and it's for both. With a couple of questions about evaluations. Do either of you have evaluation reports, and are they easy to find, or could you send them to us so we can share them with people? Because there's an interest in if you've had to provide evaluations or how you evaluate.
Yeah, certainly for us, we do a monitoring report every quarter that goes to our funders, and we will meet every quarter to kind of talk through what we're reporting on as well, to try and bring that sort of information to life. But we will pull information every quarter in terms of how many appointments were offered, attended, not attended, some outcomes, some feedback. We also, when people are moving on from the service, we will do an evaluation form with the supported person to get, and that will then be sort of included in those reports as well. And certainly I could share some of them with you if that would be of interest.
Thank you very much. It would. And I know, Wendy, you do annual reports, so let us know your latest one.
I will do. I've got an annual report, and it's a wee bit out of date now, but last year we did an impact report, and I think the impact report is what led us to change the service. So I'm happy to share that with you, and some of the tools that we use just on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to Ailey, and I want to also thank everyone for your questions and for our contributors for gamely stepping up to answer them. So, and back to Ailey.
Thank you, Louise. Yeah, thank you to Wendy and Steve and Jim for joining us and for sharing a little bit about what you're up to in your respective areas. I hope people have been able to take something away from this. I know that I certainly have.